Welcome to Whisperwood Stories. Today we read two stories, one from r/backwodscreepy and one from Let's Not Meet. Let's begin. Our first story is from Queasy Comfort. Stalked in an Ohio state park. I work as a child care professional, and one of the kids that I look after had recently gotten into hiking. I decided to take him to a really cool trail in Salt Fork State Park. We were all set to hike to Hozak's Cave after parking right near the beginning of the trailhead. The entire trail is about half of a mile, which is why I chose this trail for our hike that day. I also chose this trail because any time that I had been on it before, it was very busy and full of people and a very popular spot, which made me feel very secure. However, this past summer, we had a cluster of severe storms which caused massive damage to the trail. So to my surprise, it was much more difficult and completely empty. I wasn't bothered by the trail being obviously empty, because there was a small construction crew working on a bridge that was just barely visible from the trailhead. He was still up for the hike, despite the entire width of the trail being washed out until it was no more than a foot wide with a 6 to 12 foot drop off into a creek bed that is solid rock and several trees down. He's very athletic, and I was very confident in his abilities if he was, and he was so excited to tackle our adventure. We made it all the way to a platform that allows you to see the entire cave. There were many downed trees surrounding the platform, and it was actually closed at this point, but we had made it this far, so we decided to maneuver around the platform and proceeded the few hundred feet into the cave. We spent the most time in this area due to the difficulty, so I know exactly what it looked like. There were tree roots directly under the platform, and you could climb down either side of them. It was also worth noting that Hozak's Cave was much more like a cliff, with an overhang rock formation and a trickle of waterfall directly in the middle. It is not a creepy, closed-up cave. It is very open and beautiful. We got to the cave, and I noticed a candle that was not burning recently, but had been at some point, sitting on a large rock that had a heart carved into it. I chalked it up to be someone having a date or something and disregarded it. He wanted to climb to the top, where I noticed 2 more candles and 3 stacks of small rocks that had been stacked up by somebody. I definitely felt weird at this point, but it was at about this time that he found a small puddle full of baby salamanders and wanted to catch them. It was the happiest I had seen him in a very long time, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that it was time to go. We spent an hour catching baby salamanders, and I watched him have the time of his life. We finally decided to leave, and when we got to the platform, dead center in the middle of the tree roots was a wet washcloth hanging that was absolutely not there before. He noticed it as well, but did not pick up on the severity of the situation that we were in. At that moment, I factually knew 2 things. 1, someone was watching us, and we did not see them. And 2, they were now potentially hiding in the woods and made it a point to not be seen, but to leave an object to be noticed. There was no running back with the narrow trail, and I was not about to tell him that we were in potential danger. I told him to go to the front of me, and I just kept encouraging him that he was doing great over and over, and that seemed to speed him up naturally. I never saw anyone while we were on the trail. We got to the car, and I locked the doors immediately. On our way out of the park, a very dirty man, probably in his 30s, came out of the woods and made it a point to stare at me with the most empty of expressions that I had ever seen. The man followed me with his eyes and head as I drove by him, and continued to stare at me until I couldn't see him anymore. I knew the third fact at that point. He made it a point to make himself apparent to me, and that facts 1 and 2 were true. The stare stuck with me for days, and I considered counseling after this as it bothered me for several weeks, causing me severe anxiety. I tried to tell myself that maybe we just interrupted his bath time, and he was camping and didn't want to startle us. After all, the crazy-looking man had ample time to do anything he wanted while we were catching salamanders. I just cannot in any way rationalize why he stared into my eyes the way he did if he wanted to go unnoticed. Deep down, I know that it is much more likely that this was a deliberate action intended to scare me. He never had any idea how panicked I was, and to this day, it is the most fun I have ever seen him have. The child never had any idea how panicked I was to this day. It is the most fun that I have ever seen him have. He brings it up regularly, and it was a very positive experience for him. It was one of my worst experiences ever, and it made me feel so sick and disturbed. Our last story is from Haiti Writer. Late night visitors. This story happened to me when I still lived at my parents' house. I was commuting to college at the time and had 3 siblings that also lived at home, my brother and 2 sisters. For some context, we lived on 5 acres in rural Ohio, surrounded on both sides by woods and farm fields. Additionally, during the week, my dad normally left for work at 2 a.m., so I had always felt like it was my job to be the man of the house because he was gone during the times when you would imagine something sketchy happening. However, on this night, because it was the weekend, my dad was home. I woke up to the sound of my brother's voice trying to get my attention. We had separate rooms upstairs, and coming out of our rooms, you could look down over the banister and see our front door. When I woke up, it took a few moments to get out of the haze and realize what was going on. I looked at the clock, and it was around 2:30 a.m., and my brother told me that there were 2 men at our front door. Now this really woke me up. We quietly walk out of my room and peek over to look down at the front door. When we looked, there was no one at the door, but I noticed my parents off to the side, out of view of the glass on the front door. I whispered down to my dad, and he told me that there were 2 guys that had been talking to each other and knocking on the door. Hearing my dad say this freaked me out even more. I went back into my room and grabbed my pistol, quickly shuffling down the stairs after looking to make sure that they weren't at the door. If they had been, they would have easily seen me coming down the stairs, as it is in direct view of the door. My brother is right behind me as we head over to where my parents are, whispering to try and find out what is going on. My parents had awoken to the sound of our dog barking and had come out to find those 2 men knocking loudly at the door. At this point, the men return and begin knocking again, despite the fact that no one had come to the door and our dog was still actively barking. The fact that they were there at this time, in a location where houses are spread out hundreds of yards, and still knocking with a dog barking, made the situation even more terrifying. After a couple of minutes, the men walk away, and we all shuffle across the kitchen into the family room to peek out the windows into our driveway, which is lit up by our outside light. There was a black Cadillac sitting there, but no one was inside from what we could see. Immediately, the question was, where did these guys go? They weren't in their car, and they were no longer at the front door. Unfortunately, we figured out the answer when the handles on our back French doors started jiggling. They were actively trying to enter the back of our house, which enters into the kitchen. At this point, I just remember my mom frantically saying, "David," to my dad, as pure terror overwhelmed her. Then 2 things happened. Adrenaline filled my body as I prepared my handgun, horrified at the very real possibility that I might have to shoot these men. Secondly, my dad finally grabbed the phone, called the police, and calmly told them what was happening. Thankfully, after a minute of jiggling, they stopped at the back door and disappeared again, only to return to their knocking at the front. However, at this point, Several minutes had gone by, and suddenly we saw the local police fly up in multiple cruisers with their lights on. As they whipped into our driveway and front yard, the two men bolted away, attempting to run the long way around the house across the driveway. One of them disappeared out of our view, but the other one was intercepted by an officer yelling for him to get on the ground. He didn't, and he was immediately tased and fell onto the ground. Some of the officers went around the house after the other guy, and one of them came back to talk to my dad as we came out to the front. They ended up finding the other man hiding in my sister's little playhouse in the backyard. It appears both of them were drunk and or high, as the one who hid had cocaine on him. While they were both arrested that night, we never did find out what they were charged with or what happened to them. Needless to say, the whole experience wasn't fun. So, random men at our door in the middle of the night? Let's not meet again. Thank you for listening to Whisperwood Stories. If you enjoyed, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe down below. Do you have a story that you'd like me to read here? Consider commenting or sending it to whisperwoodsubmissions@gmail.com. The stories in this video were read with the author's permissions. Thank you again for listening, and be sure to check out the original Reddit posts. Want to support me? Check the link below where you can leave a tip if you wish. And remember, don't let the shadows get too close.